In this video, I'm going to give you some tips for completing Lab 9, the Transition Metals Unknowns experiment. I can't really give you a lot of direct advice because everybody's data is going to look a little bit different. I'm just going to give you some things to look out for when you're working on this assignment. So first of all, you're going to make some observations on 3 different transition metal cations. You're going to be using cobalt-2, chromium-3, and copper-2, and you'll be reporting that data on your post lab over here, just reporting the different appearances of all of the solutions at these different times. Now, one thing that you have to look out for when you're performing this experiment, when you are going through and making these observations at several times, that they're all listed in bold here, so 3 different times in this experiment, you're going to centrifuge and decant. And after that, you're going to end up with 2 test tubes, and one of the test tubes is going to have a colored solution in it, and the other test tube is going to have a colorless solution in it. I shouldn't say solution, it could be a solid. One test tube is going to have something that is colorful, and one test tube is going to have something that is not colorful. At this point, every time after this process, you need to make sure that the test tube with the colored substance is in the metal clamp. So sometimes after you centrifuge and decant and you get one thing that's colored and one thing that's colorless, sometimes that colored thing is going to stay in the metal clamp. Sometimes the colored thing is going to get moved into the blue rack. And if it gets moved into the blue rack, you've got to put it back into the clamp. So through all of this part 1, all of the time, in your clamp, in your metal clamp, you should always have a colored solution that you're working with every time. So this makes it maybe a little bit confusing when you're reporting your data on your post lab, reporting your observations. But if you just like keep track of your test tubes, you'll be totally fine, no problem. Once you get done making all of these observations, then you'll go through the process of practicing to identify an unknown. When you get to your actual unknown is going to contain at least 2, possibly all 3 of these cations. So you want to set it up to test, to produce a practice unknown with that same criteria. You can repeat practicing the unknown multiple times, and I definitely encourage you to do that because this is actually a pretty tricky unknown to work with because of all of the different colors. Once you feel ready, then you can get your actual unknown. Oh, where is it? Right here. Get your actual unknown and start working on it. Now, your actual unknown, like I said, is going to contain either 2 or 3 of these cations, which means you're going to have a lot of different colors. Notice that there is not a spot over here for you to report the observations of your unknown. I did that by design. I did that intentionally. Instead, you've got a spot over here that you can just write everything down, all the observations that you've made while testing your unknown. So the added challenge with the unknown, because it has 2 or 3 different colored substances in it, when you're performing all of these different chemical tests, so let's say you get to this point right here, you centrifuge and you decant, so now you have 2 test tubes. Let's say that one of them is colored and the other one is also colored. Instead of having 1 colored test tube, you now have 2 test tubes that are colorful. So what do you do? Which one goes into the metal clamp in this case? When you end up, after here, here, or here, if you end up with 2 solutions that are both colorful, you're going to have to continue the rest of the procedure with those 2 solutions separately. Let me try to explain that a little bit better. So let's say that we centrifuge and decant, we get test tube number 1 that is, let's say that it's orange, and we also get test tube number 2 that is green. So we have two different colored solutions. We're going to take this green test tube and set it aside for a minute. We're going to take our orange test tube and we're going to perform all the rest of the steps on the orange test tube. And when we're done, we're going to take that green test tube, we're going to go back to this part right here, and we're going to perform all of the rest of the steps on the green test tube as well. So if at any point you end up with 2 colors, that means that you have to perform the rest of the experiment on both of those solutions. separately, not together, separately. So what would happen if you end up with two colors here? Now you've got to perform the experiment twice. And what would happen if you ended up with two colors again down here? That would mean you'd have to continue performing it twice. So every time you end up with two colors, all of the rest of the steps need to be performed on all of those colored test tubes. So you're going to end up with a lot of data. And what you're going to do with your data that you get is try to make matches of the colors that you observed in each of these three known cations, kind of match stuff up with the colors that you're observing with your unknown. One of the nice things about this experiment is that these guys are all pretty different colors and they produce different colored solutions as well. So you should be able to pretty easily identify, like let's say all of a sudden you have like an aqua blue color and it shows up in your unknown. You could say, oh, that must mean that I probably have this CR3+, because that's the only thing that gave me that beautiful aqua blue. So in addition to just sort of documenting your observations, this is mostly for you in terms of keeping record. I'm not going to be looking for any particular things to be written out here. Like just, use this to help you keep track of things. And then when you're ready, you're going to identify your unknown and you'll upload a screenshot to show that you successfully completed it.